What's up, y'all? It's OC Myco here. I am a hobbyist mycologist. These videos are just going to be me documenting my journey through mushroom cultivation and identification, all that sort of fun stuff, just so you guys can learn from me and I can learn from you, and yeah, just want to be part of the community a little bit more, help out some other fellow hobby mycologists starting out, see if I could teach you anything. So this is going to be my first time trying the Uncle Ben tech, otherwise known as the Spider-Man tech. This is probably the cheapest and easiest ways to get started with growing your own mushrooms at home. The Uncle Ben tech uses the Ben's original ready rice whole grain brown rice packets. This was initially discovered by 90 Second Mycology on YouTube. Go check him out, he's awesome. Also, shout out to the Rookie Mycologist. Both some really great channels to follow if you're just getting started with this. I'm pretty much just following their lead and getting all the information I know from them, some Reddit forums, but also Philly Golden Teacher on YouTube is a great channel if you really want to dive into the world of mycology and mushroom cultivation at home. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you guys step by step how to inoculate bags of Uncle Ben's whole grain brown rice. If you're unsure whether or not you've sterilized enough, you have not. So make sure you are very generous with your rubbing alcohol. Next up is micropore tape. To know if it's micropore tape, it's going to say it on the inside. This tape is typically used with the dressing bandages, so you can find it at like Walgreens or CVS, your local drugstore. Next, you're going to need some nitrile gloves, powder free. You're also going to need a pair of scissors and a respirator. Paper towels also come in handy. And last but not least, our Uncle Ben's whole grain brown rice. Now, you're going to want to do this in a room with very still air. Something like a small bathroom will do. You want to turn the air and any fans off, no AC blowing, at least 30 minutes before you start inoculating your bags. You want the air to be as still as possible in the room that you're working. If you can't afford an expensive flow hood, this is the best thing to do to prevent any contaminations. Now, once we have our gloves on and our mask on, we're going to spray down our gloves with some 70% isopropyl alcohol, and we're also going to spray down all the surfaces and instruments that we're going to be using in order to help us inoculate our bags. And once again, if you aren't sure if you've sprayed enough rubbing alcohol, you haven't. So just keep spraying until everything is covered. We're going to let that sit for a moment, and then we can wipe off the excess with our paper towels. Now, once that is done and everything is soaked and cleaned and wiped off with our iso alcohol, we're going to prepare our inoculation space. So like I said, make sure all fans are off. Here I'm opening the bag containing the syringe for inoculation. All right, this is a liquid culture syringe, the B+ strain. Although this has most likely been sterilized from the cellar, we are just going to wipe it down anyway with some isopropyl alcohol. So you can't be too safe. This liquid syringe that I'm using is from Inoculate the World. I exclusively buy my liquid cultures from Inoculate the World. They have the fastest shipping time. It is honestly amazing. After I put in my order, I'll get it within like 3 days. It is beautiful. Shouts out to Inoculate the World. The guys over there are doing an amazing job. Now, before we get the needle onto this syringe, we're going to prep our Uncle Ben's rice bag. I previously did this, so I'm not too worried. I typically would do this before taking out the syringe, but I already sprayed it and wiped it down earlier. I'm just going to do it again though, because you can't be too clean. Alright, today we're going to be inoculating 6 bags. Now, when you first get these bags from the market, they're going to be filled all the way up to the top, and they're going to be quite stiff. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to break it up and push everything down to the very bottom. You don't want to pack it in completely tight because the mycelium needs air to breathe, but you want it all to be at least below the top of this writing here. As you can see here, I'll fold it over where all the rice is at least below. So it's all below that. And it's still got some give to it. It's not packed in like too tight. You want it to be like kind of like a Capri Sun. All right, and the next thing we're going to do now is prep our injection ports. And for that, we are just going to take a piece of tape like that, and we're going to stick it on right where we're going to inject. Now, before we go ahead and inject these, we are actually going to be injecting a all-in-one bag from Zombie Myco, and I'll show you how we do that, and then we'll hop over back to this and take care of these ones. All right, here we have the 5-pound all-in-one bag from Zombie Myco. On the bottom we have some rye grain, and on the top we have the grow substrate. And the reason that I'm using both this all-in-one grow bag and the Uncle Ben's is because this one only takes 5 cc's of liquid culture. So I'm gonna have a whole other half syringe, and I thought I might as well inject that into the Uncle Ben's and try out the Uncle Ben Tech while I got it. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did to the Uncle Ben's. We're gonna spray down the entire bag with 70% isopropyl alcohol to help prevent any sort of contamination. And like I said, this is from Zombie Myco. This is the second grow bag that I've used from them. So far, they're great. So as you can see here, the anatomy of a grow bag. This is an all-in-one grow bag. This is also very user-friendly, very good for beginners. You're going to inject in the injection port here. This one is a self-healing injection port, and we're going to inject it down into the grain. So we have a fresh air exchange port up here. We have the injection port down here, and at the top this is sealed, so it's like its own little environment in this bag. This is very user-friendly for beginners because you pretty much just inject and you leave it. For 3 weeks you don't do anything, you just kind of neglect tech. So it's kind of hard to mess these up unless you're just like a filthy person. It's hard to, ruin. It's hard to contaminate this. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and inject the first 5 cc's into here. Here we have our liquid culture and our sterile needle. I'm going to show you guys right now how to attach the needle in the most sterile fashion. So firstly, we're going to unscrew the cap. Set that aside. And without touching the needle, we're going to open up the packaging and screw that on there. See how I'm doing it? I'm not touching the needle at all. This is already sterile, so there's no need to burn it or do anything to it. It is already ready to go. All you're going to do is remove this cap and inject. And on the side here, you can see there's a little bit more than 10 cc's. So we're going to inject about down to the 6 mark and use the rest for our Uncle Ben Tech. All right, and without touching the needle, we're going to remove the cap. Like I said, this is already sterile, so we don't need to do any burning. We're going to find our self-healing injection port right here, and we're going to aim it downwards into the grain. All right. I'm going to turn it around so we can see how much exactly we're injecting. And we're going to inject all of our grain, or we're going to inject all of our liquid culture into the same spot, so the spores have a better chance of finding each other and creating mycelium. All right. We're going to remove our syringe from the bag and replace the cap. And we're going to set this aside for now. All right, since this is a self-healing injection port, it's not necessary to cover the opening with tape, with micropore tape, but we're going to do that anyway, just to be extra secure. All right, now that the hole that we made from the syringe is covered, we're going to take a look at the bottom, and you can see all that liquid mycelium that we injected. See, like right here and right here. So what I'm going to do right now is give it a little mix, because we don't want any pooling at the bottom. I'm just going to mix it really gently, because we don't want to mix up the rye grain with the substrate. We want them to be separate still. We don't want to mix that up until the rye grain is at least 80% colonized by mycelium. All right. So now that we've finished injecting this one, I'm just going to put a label on it, and we'll move over back to the Uncle Ben tech. All right, back here with the Uncle Ben tech, I'm going to go ahead and start by spraying down my gloves. And let's get inoculating. And remember, the first step to inoculating your liquid culture or spore syringe or agar, whatever it is you're using, you want everything to be as sterile as possible, like surgical room sterile. I can barely breathe in this room right now because the air is so full of 70% isopropyl alcohol. That's how you want it to be. All right. So, to prep the bags, you want to move all of your grain down, or all of your rice down, about to that point. You still want it to be breathable in there, so don't squish it completely down there, but you want it below the original text, at least, because we're going to put some fresh air exchange ports up here on the top. And if there's any grains of rice that stick to that fresh air exchange, that's going to be grounds for contamination. So we want to push all of that down to the bottom, and then use some sort of credit card or something to push all that grain down so there's nothing there. There's nothing, it's just completely flat. There's no grain, no nothing. And then you're just going to repeat the process with all of your bags until they're all prepped and looking like this, with some micropore tape over where we are going to be injecting our liquid culture. Since we used this needle on our all-in-one grow bag from Zombie Myco, it is no longer sterile. And there is possibly contamination on this needle. Now, I'm not saying that Zombie Myco has contaminated grain or contaminated substrate or contaminated bags, nothing. I'm just pointing out the possibility that if that bag was contaminated and we stuck this needle in there, we are now going to be contaminating every other bag that we stick this in. So from here on out, we are going to flame sterilize the tip of this needle. So in order to do that, you're going to want to get a creme brulee torch or a lighter. That reminds me, we need to sterilize the lighter. And be very careful when you're doing this, working with rubbing alcohol and flame, because rubbing alcohol is highly flammable. I might singe my eyebrows in the entire room doing this because the entire air is full of rubbing alcohol. In fact, I'm going to flick this as far away from me as possible just to double check. The room might explode. All right, no explosion. All right, here we go. We're going to take about half the length of the syringe and we're going to hold it under the fire until it is red hot. This works a lot better with a creme brulee torch, but I do not own one of those, so I'm going to be using this lighter. And it's going to take longer, but that's okay. And a lot of this soot is going to form on the tip of the needle. That's also okay because that soot is sterile. All right, it's hard to see because it's black from the soot, but that is red hot. And we're going to let that cool for a moment before we inject it into our Uncle Ben's brown rice. Now, for the Uncle Ben bags, we're going to use 0.5 to 0.6 cc's as to not create too humid or moist of an environment inside of these bags. If you have too much liquid inside of the bag, it can create a favorable environment for contamination. So we're going to go ahead and peel back our tape that we have prepared, and we want to inject this in the same exact spot as all of them. So make sure you pick a spot that you want and go ahead and put it in and inject 0.5 to 0.6 cc's of your liquid culture. All right, we're going to close this back up. And as soon as you pull the needle out, you're going to want to close that back up as to not get any other pollutants or contaminants into that hole that you just made. Inside of these bags is a sterile environment. We want to close up back that hole that we make to keep it that way. All right, so now that the 0.5 cc's of liquid culture in there, I'm just gonna press it down into it and mix it up a little bit. Do a little bit of a squish and mix. And we're going to set it into our tub to the side here and work on the rest of them. And just like before, we're going to flame sterilize the needle until it is red hot, because just like the bag before, it could have some form of contamination inside of it or on the surface of it. Even though we took the precautions that we did, we are going to take one more precaution and flame sterilize just to be double, triple, quadruple check it and be sure that we don't spread the contamination if there is one. All right, let that cool for a second. And let's go ahead and inject in the same spot if you can. You are going to deal with contamination 100%, at least once throughout your growing career. So there's reasons that we take all the steps that we do in order to mitigate the chances of getting contamination. One of those steps being using isopropyl alcohol, flame sterilizing, working in a still air box or in front of laminar flow hood. And one last thing that we could do is diversify. As such, I'm doing right now. I put half of this liquid culture into the all-in-one grow bag from Zombie Myco. And for the rest, I'm separating into 6 separate sterile bags of Uncle Ben's brown rice. Separating doesn't necessarily lower the chances of contamination, but it makes it less detrimental, less discouraging. If one of my bags gets contam, I still have 5 more. Alright, now that we are done inoculating our liquid culture syringe into our Uncle Ben tech, we are going to put the cap back on our syringe and dispose of it properly. So we're not done quite yet. We're going to re-sanitize our workstation, and then we're going to cut the fresh air exchange ports into our Uncle Ben bags so our mycelium can get fresh air and release carbon dioxide in order to colonize completely. Unlike plants, mushrooms breathe like us. They inhale oxygen and release carbon dioxide. So they need some way to be breathing fresh air. I'm going to show you guys right now how we're going to do that after I sanitize my workspace. Now we're going to put on a fresh pair of gloves. And once again, guys, sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. You want to make sure that you're wearing a fresh pair of gloves. Spray these down with isopropyl alcohol again. Make sure you're wearing fresh, clean clothes, laundered clothes. Take a shower before you do this. Put on a mask. You don't want any sort of, any of your stank-ass breath contaminating your bags. All right. Now, at this point, we're going to create the FAE, or fresh air exchange ports, on our bags. For this, we're going to need a pair of sanitized scissors and our micropore tape. All right. Now, before you do this, you want to make sure that every single grain of rice is down below the original text right here. If there's even a single grain of rice above that, and it touches the FAE, that will be grounds for contamination, and it will ruin your whole bag. So we're going to make one on this side and one on this side, so it has 2 fresh air exchange ports. After we've made sure that there's no grains of rice in this upper portion here, we're going to separate the back from the front by squeezing it like you're going to open a bag of chips. We don't want to make any sort of holes or tears in the bag other than the fresh air exchange port. So make sure that you don't pull it too roughly. Right. Now that we have the front separated from the back, you're going to make 2 triangle cuts into the bag, one up and one down. So you have something like this. Make sure that it didn't cut the back. And then we're going to cover that hole with a fresh strip of micropore tape. You want to cover up these holes as fast as you make them in order to prevent any sort of contamination from entering. Now we're just going to do the other side, and we will do this repeatedly for all 7 of our bags. All right, this is a finished bag ready to go into the incubation or colonization chamber. When you're finished with them, you want to either set them upright like this or on their back. Just make sure that there is nothing touching these fresh air exchange holes. To prevent pooling, I would recommend placing it on its back like this. Now to store our Uncle Ben tech, I'm going to lay them all in this unused monotub, standing up like this. And I'm going to leave 3 of them on their side like that, just to see if it has any kind of different effect in the colonization. And once they're in the monotub, I'm going to cover it with this, with the monotub lid to try and conserve some heat in there. And then I'm just going to place it on top of my VivoSun grow tent. The grow tent is housing the all-in-one bags, and this is just going to sit on top of my grow tent. This room that I'm in is a pretty small bathroom, maybe 5 feet by 3 feet. And it's honestly the perfect grow room for my mushrooms. You don't need a space this big to work. You just want to make sure that when you are doing your inoculations, that is as still as possible in regards to the air. You can see that I duct tape shut the vents. I have a towel underneath the door. There's no fans running. I turned off my humidifier and my air purifier. So the air in here is as still as possible as to avoid any sort of contamination. You also want the area where your mushrooms are going to be growing to be dark, at least for the colonization phase. Once you initiate fruiting for your mushrooms, they will benefit from 12 hours of light per day. They do not photosynthesize like plants do, but however, they are photosensitive. So they don't create their energy from sunlight, but they will react to sunlight, and having some sort of light above them helps them grow straight up so you can get those thick, full canopies. With our monotub full of our Uncle Bens, we're just going to place this over here and turn off the lights so it's nice and dark in here. I have the temperature in here set to 80 degrees. You want to keep your temperature anywhere from 70 to 85 degrees. I like to keep mine from anywhere from 75 to 80 degrees, so it's a nice middle ground. The hotter the better for colonization. It helps the mycelium grow quicker. However, that's a double-sided coin because contamination and mold also love hot temperatures. So if you want to be on the safe side, maybe keep your grow room around room temperature like 65 to 72 degrees. I would not go any lower than 65 degrees because it would be a lot harder for your mycelium to grow, and it might not grow at all. I hope you guys enjoyed my first video, Uncle Ben's tech for inoculating and colonizing mycelium. If you guys have any questions or recommendations or input on my video, please feel free to leave a comment. Like I said, this was my first time. Give me a follow if you guys liked the video. I'm going to be releasing more videos like this in the future. Go over to my Instagram. Also support me there if you'd like. Like I said, I have links to all the equipment that I use and also where I buy my spores and my liquid cultures. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.